I don't know how many of you noticed that the speaker that was supposed to be here tonight canceled last week. And I called Paul and said, okay, we got a problem because 4 speakers have canceled, and maybe we could talk about the history of the club. Paul said, that's a great idea. Who's going to do it? Like, okay, here we go. So I think that it's kind of appropriate for so many of our new members to kind of reflect on some of the history of the club and how long we've been around and who we are and what we've done. And as Paul mentioned, I have too much free time, I guess, is my problem. But I started researching really some district history. It turns out that maybe 20 years ago, the district that we're in negotiated with Duke University to be the archivist of all the history of the district. And so what happens is district governors, when they finish their term or maybe a year later, they take these boxes of materials over to Duke and dump them. Duke puts them in the archives and says, oh, these are really important. You can go into Fort Knox easier than you can get to these materials at Duke. But I decided I wanted to look for some of those materials. So they're off-site. You have to plan ahead. They bring the boxes over to the Rosenthal Library. And I started going through those materials, really more focused on the district. Although I also have a lot of Chapel Hill history and say, don't throw anything away. If you got something that's got Chapel Hill on it, call me. I'll find a place for it. But what happened in this research over at Duke was kind of interesting, is I started going through this box of District 7710 materials, and guess what? Most of the box was not district, it was the Rotary Club of Chapel Hill. Most of you don't know, there was a member of the club, Barry Creedle. Barry was a district governor, was active in RTP Club and then active in this club. And all of Barry's files ended up in those boxes at Duke, including a lot of stuff about the Chapel Hill Club. So I am now back to around 1955, documenting all of the officers of the club. We had a list of presidents, but we really didn't have the list of who all the officers were. And remember that we've got a 90th anniversary. I don't know how many of us are going to be around for the 100th anniversary, so let's focus on 90. But my goal, number one, is to document all of those officers. And I think we'll be able to accomplish that once I move to the Chapel Hill Library and the Chapel Hill News. Most of you aren't aware. Anybody ever seen this book? PH, you ever seen this book?
I don't know. What is the name of it?
Rotary in Chapel Hill,
Okay.
1928 to 1955.
Oh.
This book was actually published by the club a long damn time ago, 1955. I've gotten 2 copies of it through people who donated them to me. And I'm actually having someone type all of the information in this. The idea being that we add to this history since 1955 and try to update or publish. Given the resources of the club, it's going to be a 3-ring notebook on cheap paper, but at least we'll do something to document a lot of the history of the club. And that book has great information, really, about some of the founding members and individuals. You're going to find that tonight's program on the history could be considered rambling, but at the end, I hope you'll pick up some new information. For many years, and again, I don't know why, is I've kept up with the seniority. I guess I was interested in when I could become number 1. I don't know what started that. But I've kept this for many years. We have one member of this club who's been a Rotarian for 55 years. In this club, 55 years.
Wow.
Who is that? Arthur DeBerry. He's not here tonight. If you're interested in what he looked like 50 years ago, there's a picture up here of what he looked like back in those days. But we should be excited, and we don't spend enough time. You know, I would challenge the newer members of the club, sit with Art at an upcoming meeting and just talk about it, his involvement over these many years. Now, there is someone here tonight, I won't say that he's an OF, but the fact that he's been in the club 37 years might have some significance, and another member 39 years. Who do you think is a 39-year member of this club? And he's here. See? And it's not Lynn Love. He is old, but he's not that old. Bill, who's been in 39 years?
Oh, no, it's him.
Okay, so Bill Coakley was 10 years old when he joined Rotary. But, you know, how many of you realize Bill is actually, depending on how you count this, he's number 3 on seniority. Some purists would argue that Stan Mandel is no longer in the club, who is number 2. And that's one way for Bill to move up if we take Stan off the list. But right now, he's still on the list. Mark Hudson is number 4. Number 5, the 5th longest serving member of this club. He used to drive. No, PH dropped out, so he doesn't count. See, we don't know how long he's been here. So this member was on work release for many of those years. He's been retired for a while, but who has been since 1978 a member? Lynn Loveker.
Okay.
So another OF. Yeah, that's a clean version of what OF is, but after the meeting I'll tell you ladies what that is.
Okay.
Actually, I'm number 7. Roger Harris is number 8. Jim Lilly is number 9. Who would be number 10? I mean, you can't believe this person is that old. The number 10 in seniority. They've been a member since 1989. They are part of the group of drinks every Tuesday before the meeting.
Done.
Not Don Bolton.
Not done.
She,
Anna
Donovan.
Anna.
The reason Anna is number 10 is that she goes up there and drinks every week, but the rest of us stays in the club.
But she's a mere girl. How can she be it?
So I'm not going to cover all, but basically it's to give you an idea of those people who've been around a long time. If those that don't realize, they keep, yes, press.
I just want to point out, I'm not bragging, I've been a member for 55 years for Rotary.
Press, Mellon has been a member for 55 years, and how many different clubs?
3.
3 different clubs. They wouldn't keep him, so we took him. Now, I'm being videotaped. There's a royalty payment for that, and I don't stand still, so he's having a tough time with me there. Okay, I've got 10 items of significant information. When was the club chartered? 1928, June 8th.
Wow.
Interestingly,
Huh.
the article in the newspaper, which can really confuse you, was May 4th. There was an article in the Chapel Hill News on May 4th talking about the election of the officers for the club. And then, you know, it takes Rotary a while. They used to be quicker than they are now to get all that paperwork done. I'll divert for a minute. I was involved in the orientation, the kind of creation of the Chapel Hill Carver Sunrise Club. And RI is very specific on the different classifications that you must have for a new club. So we did all the work, sent in all the paperwork for the new Chapel Hill Carver Sunrise Club, and we got a call saying, "I'm sorry, you got 2 attorneys, and so it doesn't meet the classification requirements." So I called that person up. I don't have a clue who it was. I said, do you go to church? And they said, well, yeah, I go to church. It's okay, we're going to change your classification to religion. I set it up as religion, or I approved it, and we got the charter. So you got to be creative. What was the news headline in May of 1928? What was significant, big headline? Nobody has a clue. Amelia Earhart flew solo across the Atlantic almost the same time that the club was being created. She was trying to get away from the club. Number 3, for over 60 years, where did we meet? Carolina Inn. Why did we leave the Carolina Inn?
They charge for parking.
They charged for parking. They kept going up on the price of the meal. We were willing to pay $50 for dinner, but we weren't paying the damn dollar to park. So we moved. What other nights have we, and what night did we meet at Carolina Inn? Wednesday. For over 60 years, the club met on Wednesday. Why did we meet on Wednesday? We couldn't meet on Tuesday. Why couldn't we meet on Tuesday?
What's called there?
Kiwanis met on Tuesday. So we couldn't meet on Tuesday. But we've met on Monday night because of restaurants being able to handle us. And we're actually here on Tuesday night because that's what the country club wanted. How many of you remember meeting at the American Legion hut? What was significant about meeting at American Legion hut?
It was terrible.
We had to set up the tables, take down the tables.
Yeah.
It was catered.
It was catered. The catering wasn't bad. It was getting us to set up and take down the tables was really the problem. For a while, we met at the Europa, which is now the Sheraton. We met at Southern Season at the Weather Vane.
Yep.
Then came here prior to the fire. After the fire, came back here. Okay, who was the charter president of the club? Nobody knows. Nobody cares. He looked at, I showed you that earlier. That's part of what's in that book. It was Eric Abernathy. He was a doctor here in town. Half of the records have his name misspelled. His name is not Abernathy with an A, it's Abernathy with an E. And so I'm trying to go through and change a lot of the club records to correct that based on, I think, that 1955 historical is the most accurate, and that we probably just, in creating lists, change that. This club has a great history of what other clubs have we chartered. In order to charter a new club, there has to be a sponsor club. There have been 4. Who are they?
East Chapel Hill.
East Chapel Hill.
Probably Sunrise.
Sunrise.
Sunrise. Hillsborough. RTP. What was the Chapel Hill Club's position on the creation of the East Chapel Hill Club? Do we like it or not like it? Or do we care? Those of you who are new to Rotary don't understand the history. Cities and towns had geographical boundaries that they controlled. And you couldn't create a new club if the old club didn't give permission. Chicago, 1 club. New York City, 1 club. Washington, D.C., 1 club. How dare you want to have another club? I'm not going to read you the whole document, but I'm going to read you some excerpts. I'm not sure if this was in 1966 or 67. East Chapel Hill chartered in 68, so based on the dates, this could have been 1966. Some members, this is talking about our club, some members suggested that they had heard much from advocates of an East Chapel Hill club, but little from those who think it would not be in the best interest of Rotary, town, the Chapel Hill Club, and the university. So, like everything in Rotary, a committee was formed. The committee studied the issue and talked about releasing territory and said, support for this comes from records of Rotary International, that Chapel Hill was too small, it couldn't support a second club. It talks about destroying the Chapel Hill Club if you allowed these renegades to create another club in Chapel Hill. There is lots of documentation about why it shouldn't have been allowed, but the district governor wanted that new club to happen, And in fact, the other thing is we supported the RTP club. They both chartered the same night. RTP, East Chapel Hill, both were sponsored by this club. We thought RTP was great. They were far enough away, but we didn't like the idea of East Chapel Hill. So it's interesting to read, and this came out of some of those archive materials. From 1928 until 1955, and actually I didn't have time to research this, but it's far beyond that, what Chapel Hill position was always a member of the club? Chapel Hill town position.
Mayor.
The mayor. From the start of the club, at least through 55, and we know that it continued long after that, that the mayor was always a member of the club, the town manager was always a member of this club. Who was district governor when the Chapel Hill Club was formed?
Yeah.
Nobody cares, but who?
Hodges.
Luther Hodges. So Luther Hodges was district governor when the club was formed, and at that time, where was he a member?
Dan?
Close. He was a member of the Rotary Club of Downtown Spray. Now, if you're new to North Carolina, you don't know where Spray was. That is now Eden, North Carolina.
That
Sir,
happened in
Hey, I said
67 too.
Eden, but you didn't.
Oh, I didn't hear. Well, speak up, Anna. Okay. So the fact that Luther Hodges was a district governor, he was from Spray, his real Rotary activity wasn't in Chapel Hill. Where was he really active? Where did he get his?
Chicago.
No, close.
Washington.
Oh, New York.
He went to New York as an executive and was in the New York Club and was really active in Rotary before he came back to Chapel Hill, became a member of this club, became Rotary International president, became governor of North Carolina. But his original Rotary involvement was in Eden and then in New York City. What was one of the first projects of this club? PH might remember some of this.
I know one of the earlier ones was spaghetti dinner, but I don't know if that's what
The
you
club did some fundraising spaghetti dinners, but in that history book, there are several examples of early projects, one of which was the pig club chain. Basically, the club paid for a pig, gave it to a young person. When that pig had babies, they gave it to another young person.
That's good.
And therefore, this chain of helping young people was a part of the club.
Piggy International.
Piggy International. Okay. Another project after that was called the Strawberry Chain, and it was kind of the same concept. Is the club bought strawberry plants, gave them to young people to have strawberry gardens, and then some of those plants given to another young person. And so those were some of the early projects. Lots of other early projects. This club was involved in a lot of the construction at the YMCA camp down south of town, Clearwater, and that area. And lots of other projects over the years. We're not leaving early. 2 members had second generation service president. Who were the 2 members? Not the second generation, but the first generation.
Joel Carter.
Joel Carter, and who was the second generation?
Catherine.
Catherine. Who was the second one? Who was the original and who was the second generation? And now, the potential for a third generation.
Peacock, Earl.
Earl Peacock Sr. was president of the club. Earl Peacock Jr. was president of the club. And Gail's not here tonight, but I would advocate that we need a third generation president of the club. Which I think is significant that really Catherine got involved to be with her dad. And we were lucky that she was able to serve as president. We're getting close to the end. Past district governors, the club has had 4. Can you name 4 past district governors came from this club and served? Can you name 1?
You are.
That's one.
Okay, can you name 2?
No, that's worth 2 right there.
Hodges. Luther Hodges.
Luther
Well,
Hodges?
we
No.
don't count, I mean, you could count Luther, but we don't really count him because when he was governor, a district governor, he wasn't from the club.
Okay.
Barry Cradle.
Barry Cradle. You know, that's interesting. I think Barry Cradle is identified as RTP, but he should be counted as Chapel Hill. So that's 5. I actually served in 92, 93, and it was a lot of controversy at the district level because I followed a member of the club from 90, 91. Only, you know, that person, now 2 years later, I was governor. Donald Hayman.
Okay.
Many of you remember Donald, who was really active. Donald was a governor in 90, 91, and I was 92, 93. Some of the old timers remember Vic Huggins. How many of you remember Vic Huggins and actually were a compatriot of his? You know, he was district governor in 1947, so if you were his compatriot, you're damn old now. And Bob Madry was a member of the club, and he was a district governor under the old classification when the district governor was all of North Carolina. So we've had 5 district governors. Who was our first female member in PH? You can't answer.
Sharon Finch.
Well, how did you know?
We all know.
Sharon Finch was the first female member. When was that?
87, maybe, 2 years before me.
88.
88.
1988, 89. Who was the club president?
I know who the speaker was for
Earl
it.
Peacock was the speaker.
Jim Johnson was the club president
Oh, Jim Johnson.
that year. I was the president-elect. The president-elect following me was Lynn.
Oh, Floyd Freed.
So we were all on the board. Jim was pretty adamant of we didn't need any women in the club. I was pretty adamant that, yeah, we needed women in the club. You know, it was a big controversy. If you go back and research, the East Chapel Hill Club actually was quoted in the newspaper soon after this that they were open to female members, but there were none qualified in Chapel Hill. It's one thing to say it, it's another to put it in the newspaper. I mean, come on. So Sharon was our
pretty well
first.
sure that they wouldn't have women coming into the club,
Right.
right?
That could be another whole program. That would be fun to talk about that history. Who was our first female president?
Catherine Carter.
Catherine Carter. Had several since then. I get together with Catherine a couple times a year and tell her how much we miss her as a member of the club. If you're interested, I'd be glad to read you all the club officers from 1955 to today, but since it's so hot, I don't think you really want to do that. I would encourage you, this photograph is from the 45th anniversary in 1973. Some of the older members of the club will recognize many of these members who were members in 83, 93, and so forth. So I hope you gain some new knowledge about this club, our long history as a club. Our 89th president has been selected. We don't yet know who the 90th president will be, but whoever that is better be ready to have this great, glorious party. We had a great event for the 75th, and I hope we'll have a great event for the 90th. So I'm sorry the speaker that was scheduled in here, hopefully he'll be here later, and Jim Lilly, go.
Now, when did PH join? Because the reason I got into the club was PH said, I was at the Carolina Inn, he said if we put Lily in the club, maybe the food would get better. PH,
In fact, that's why we took you, and it didn't help a bit. When did you originally join, PH? Do you remember?
Oh, I didn't hear what he said.
He said you convinced him to join because then the food would be better at the Carolina Inn, because you know back then he worked there.
I think I joined in 81,
81.
82, 80, I don't know.
And actually, PH, back in the 80s or early 90s, you were involved in a project with the school system, economic something.
It was called, oh gosh, what we did was it was a really nifty project. We went into the schools and organized an actual corporation. And I remember Mark Hudson would go with me and he would tell them how to form a charter. and we'd have a banker go and know how to make a loan from a bank, and they actually made the loan. They'd have somebody in charge of sales, and they sold jelly beans, jelly bellies, and they made up to $5,000 for trips to go to DC. It was the 5th graders, and we did it for a number of years and pulled it off successfully, very successful.
Okay, one last question. The president's ready to go. Okay, thank you very much. See you next week.
Well done.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, Kevin. Nathan, do you have any